In this video, I'm going to answer the following questions. How do we change timelines intentionally? How do you know when you change timelines? And is timeline jumping bypassing? Very important question. So in part one, I presented the question that if we are inside of our consciousness, which is also inside of a greater consciousness, the collective consciousness, and then it probably just grows and grows from there, back to the one. If we are inside our consciousness as opposed to our consciousness being inside of us, can we simply shift realities by just changing our thoughts and our perspectives? So, one of the quotes that really has stuck with me, and it's all over the spiritual community, and if you study law of attraction, you'll come across this. But essentially, it said that you perceive what you are the frequency of. So, you have to be a vibrational match for what is showing up in your reality. And what's showing up in your reality, there's always a lesson there. There's always an opportunity there. It's informing you, it's guiding you, it's enlightening you on your journey, right? And this is how we are able to continue to make the choices as we explore this path of our life here and our path and purpose. And we then will receive what is in alignment with the frequency of our choices, our thoughts, and our observations. So, this essentially is a mirror experience, a reflection experience that is talked about a lot in the spiritual community. So, what determines your vibrational frequency? Because that's key. We also know that our vibrational frequency will indicate or have an influence on what timeline we reside in, what we experience. So, what does determine your vibrational frequency? Our daily thoughts, which stem from beliefs, right? Our dominant emotions, which also stem from belief, because if you don't have a belief about something, you don't necessarily know how to feel about it. And sometimes we have emotions out of nowhere, right? And there could be something happening within our environment that is triggering or activating that deeper belief, right? Or it could just be honestly the energy in the field, right? But it is bringing up a memory or belief or a thought that comes along with that emotion. So it's always serving a purpose in my eyes. Our lifestyle choices also determine our vibrational frequency and our environment, as mentioned. And so our frequency is really important. The frequency of the collective, and also, you've heard me before speak of the frequency of the planet and how the planet's going through its own evolutionary process. So we can say a shift in our perspective, essentially a shift in our thoughts, our beliefs, our ideas will shift our frequency, thus shifting our entire timeline, right? It's going to impact the entire timeline. And again, this can be an individual or a collective component. So when it comes to any kind of practice or goal or anything like that, like whatever it is that a desire, what you want to experience. For me, I am always encouraging people to just get curious initially and ask yourself why. Like, why do I want to do this? What's the purpose? What's my intention? Why do I want to change timelines? That's really important because this will really indicate for you if you are bypassing the whatever is in your reality right now. I'm not going to lie, one of the motivating factors for recording this video, sharing here, initially, aside from people inviting me to speak more on this, it took me some time, but recently I have not been very happy with what's been showing up in my personal reality and collectively. But I feel I have more, control, so to say, with my own personal experience. And so I was sitting asking myself, okay, what am I missing? Like, how do I leap or how do I shift to a timeline, my highest timeline, right? And I had to dig a little bit deeper and ask myself, okay, but why? Like, why do you want to shift? What's happening here? Am I running from something? Am I escaping? Am I bypassing? Hence the motivation and inspiration for sharing this with you. And so recall the core elements of shifting or of a timeline, right? Of what makes a timeline. Our milestones, our turning points, our relationships, and our lessons. Lessons are major. And so, in order to shift a timeline, one of the main ways to do that is to learn the necessary lessons, right? To go deeper with the experience that you have, to get curious and investigate what your struggles are currently in this life. Because it's almost like when you think about someone who feels really uncomfortable in a certain environment, like a certain place. Like for me, I'll give myself as an example again. I really only live in a place for 2 or 3 years and then I want to move. I've been in this home for 8 years now, almost 8 years. And it I have to constantly change things around in the home. And when I really went deeper with it, I personally am someone who needs freshness. Like I just need freshness in my life. I need like in a sense the freshness creates like the curiosity, the ideas, the energy. And so I need freshness. And so when I'm in a new environment, it creates that freshness. I have a whole new space, but that gets exhausting and that gets tiring. And I want to have a home and I want to lay roots. And also this is reflected in other aspects of my life too. And so when I got to the bottom of that, of like why I want to move every so often, why I get super restless, like even in relationships, it's like I'm seeing it show up in these core elements. There's a core lesson or a core experience, or you could say core frequency that's showing up in these different elements. And so it kind of keeps me, in a sense, I would say, connected to a certain timeline because I haven't fully integrated that lesson. So even if I shift to another timeline, it'll be like a little bit better, probably, which I've experienced that. And this is growth, right? But also I'm still learning. It's not going to be like a quantum leap, a quantum shift, right? Where there's a major like shift in our reality, right? All of a sudden I'm like wealthy and I'm like going from place to place and traveling. Like I can have that, but I also have to learn this core lesson that is entangled with my core frequency in a sense first, right? And so this is helping, like that in itself is giving me a deeper understanding of how to quote unquote not bypass what I'm experiencing because it's just going to come back up again, right? Every time I move, I'm like I said, I'm good for about 2 or 3 years and I'm like, oh, I got to get out of here. This is, I need a new space. I can't stand it here. But there's always something in a new space after a while because it loses its novelty. It feels like out of alignment and something feels off. And so I've learned to really anchor myself and to do different things. Like in this home, I've learned to shift furniture around and do different things or have seasonal shifts where like I'm like, okay, this is here for this season of autumn or summer. Which brings in that newness and that inspiration. But then also I'm able to identify um an underlying like an actual true dislike, I could say, of the space that I'm in, right? And I can really truthfully, honestly evaluate if I want to shift spaces or not, right? Because if it keeps coming up and coming up and coming up, and I'm doing the shadow work and all of that, and I'm going deeper with the source of it, then I know that, okay, like I'll make another choice and I will try this pathway and we'll see what unfolds. And I learn from that shift, right? And so, because it's like the awareness expands and grows, right? And so, when you are intentional with why you are wanting to shift and you're doing the necessary shadow work, you're responding to your environment and the core elements with the action that is in alignment with your truest self, then that is not bypassing. That's literally working with the energy, being in the energy. So, it's like the more inner work you do, it leads you to the illumination of your core frequency, right? And your energetic base point. And so then once you are in alignment with that, as I mentioned with myself, then you can start to do the necessary work around that, but you just naturally shift into a different timeline. So it's happening anyways. The more present you are with your life, with your energy, with your environment, the more aware, the more like intentional you are and more grounded you are with responding to your environment, responding to the choices that you have in a way that's in alignment with your truest self, with your soul's desires and passions. You are naturally shifting to that timeline. And sometimes it could be a major shift where, as I mentioned in that YouTube short that I shared a year ago, your memories start to fade and you start to have new memories. Some things like you're like, oh, I kind of remember that. Some things you're like, oh, I don't remember that at all. And it makes you feel a little crazy, which is why I ended up recording that video. So that brings me to the next question. How do you know if you have changed timelines? So they're going to be subtle changes mostly. And then, as I mentioned, there might be more obvious ones, right? Or more bigger ones if it's something where you just have this major breakthrough and the way you respond or the choice that you make is in alignment with a very expansive, a very like, what is it, coherent, integrated timeline, then you're really that's gonna be a big one and you're gonna really notice it. But a lot of times it's subtle shifts, like your relationships are changing. As I mentioned, your memory changes and you have minimal resistance on your path. So if things start to happen with ease, as opposed to like, the past, then you can get an understanding like, oh, I'm in a different reality where things are really working out for me. Like things are always working out, but it's more clear and obvious that things are working out for me. So I must be in more alignment with my truth. I'm in the space of coherence. I'm in coherence with my true nature. You'll start to see environments change. So you'll see yourself in um, just even things that may have bothered you in a space before. They don't really bother you as much, or you'll start to see like the outside world change based on, the timeline that you're in, the timeline that you desire. There'll be, excuse me, dominant emotional shifts. So, say if you're someone who's always pessimistic or always like maybe you're in a depressive state, if you've been doing the work, you'll notice that you shift timelines when you're just like, oh, wow, I'm always in a good mood. Or like, I feel so much lighter. I don't feel heavy anymore. That's a shift, right? And so this can also just really be broken down to a shift in experience, right? A shift in reality. You'll just feel like a different person, right? For me, I had a whole name change and identity shift in some ways. And that for me was a profound timeline shift, right? That was almost like a quantum leap where I was communicating with my higher self, Urania. As for some of you don't know, who might not know, my birth name is Portia, and it was a whole experience and journey of shifting from Portia to Urania, which Urania was my higher self, and now it's all integrated in coherence in that way. So that is a very strong indicator of a timeline shift. And as I mentioned, the memories waning and changing. The past and the future are slightly different, right? And so the core elements and the details of surrounding those elements, right? So those events, those markers on the timeline or that make up the timeline are different, whether it be a subtle difference or something more obvious. So, in the event of exploring this topic and just touching on memory and all of that, I have to touch on the Mandela effect. So, the Mandela effect is the collective experience or result of a timeline shift. Now, this is a theory, right? There hasn't been any proven facts that this is something that is truth, that is reality, that is fact. But a lot of us really collectively have a strong emotion, a strong response to this Mandela effect, what we call Mandela effect. So collectively, the Mandela effect came about around 2009 as a concept. That's when it originated. A woman by the name of Fiona Broome coined this term as she was at a convention, I believe, and there was just this collective experience of a lot of people remembering that Nelson Mandela passed away in prison in the 1980s. But in reality, he passed away in 2013. Like he was still alive. People's minds were blown. And so I guess I should define what Mandela effect is. And I'm sure if you watch this video, you probably already know. And, that's a fun deep dive to go into. But essentially, the Mandela effect is a phenomenon where a large group of people collectively share a quote unquote false memory of an event, a detail, or a fact that does not align with historical reality. So, a really popular example is the Berenstain Bears. I'm a millennial. We millennials and other generations before us remember it being Berenstain, but it's apparently Berenstain. Stain instead of Stein. Blows my mind every time. Also, Star Wars, right? So when Darth Vader revealed his truth to Luke, a lot of us remember him saying, Luke, I am your father. Like I can literally hear, Luke, I am your father. Apparently, it is no, I am your father. And a lot of us are, no, it is not. So that's one thing too. And then Fruit of the Loom is a popular one, as the label we remember had the cornucopia of fruits. And what it says it is now is just fruit laying there. So we're all kind of like, hmm. And the interesting thing is that when you look it up, like people, I've gone down a whole deep dive on this in reference to just other people's experience and what they posted and shared. And people will go back to their childhood books and their clothing from Fruit of the Loom, from that they still happen to have from the 90s. I don't know. But essentially they'll go back and it'll say Berenstain. It will be the Fruit of the Loom without the cornucopia. And people will present it like, oh, no, actually, it was always this. Because look, I have the proof. It says stain. So it wasn't stain, even though I know I have all these nostalgic memories around this book and the show. No. And for me, after doing all of the, metaphysical, spiritual work that I've been doing and just connecting to different concepts and feeling into my own truth and just how my beliefs, how I perceive things, I was like, well, it makes sense if we shift timelines, as I mentioned with the memories, that timeline has there's subtle differences. And so if the present is different, then it makes sense that the past would be slightly different too, right? So there were always Berenstain Bears, there were always Fruit of the Loom, but there are these subtle differences, right? And so there came a point in time where there was a collective shift, which in my exploration, essentially it was said to be around the time of 2008, 2009. And as far as the Mandela effect, that was when that term, that concept was coined, Mandela effect in 2009, but it didn't get popular until 2013, which for me, I'm like, 2012 was when it said that we entered into a new consciousness, the consciousness of humanity, of the planet shifted. And there's also some astronomical and astrological like elements to 2012, right? And so that makes a lot of sense to me. If we collectively shifted timelines, then our past would be slightly different. And then it brought up further questions about the future, about with déjà vu. It's like, okay, is déjà vu us remembering the future? And now then in 2012, with the shift of consciousness, we awaken to a certain level where a lot of us could perceive the different timelines happening at once, alternate realities happening at once. So that got me to thinking. And now, as we're discussing, or as I'm sharing this in 2026, and some of you are watching this in 2026, there's another factor that I want to consider, and I'm going to share more on this possibly, but the Large Hadron Collider, utilized by CERN. Look it up, it's a whole deep dive. But that essentially began in 2008 is when they first started up this machine, which essentially they were, I believe, wanting to emulate the Big Bang, along with other aspects that come into that. So it's all quantum physics. And so they're crashing these like quantum particles together over and over again. And apparently there are people who speculate that that kind of ripped and teared space-time, or whatever they're doing in there, creating wormholes, who knows, right? Conspiracy theories, I love them. But nonetheless, it's a speculation. And what's really interesting though is that that started in 2008. And the Higgs boson particle, the God particle, you can look into that too, but I will share more on that if you desire. That was discovered in 2012 through this machine, the LHC. So I'm just so curious about all of this. June 29th of 2026, CERN shut down the LHC to basically facilitate upgrades, like significant upgrades, right? And so since 2008, they said it's been pretty much running 24/7 with like short breaks here and there for maintenance. So they are planning to have it up and running again in 2030. There's also speculation about 2030 and a major shift in the consciousness of humanity. So I am going to deep dive into that. And naturally, I'll be sharing with you all. So thank you so much. I would love to hear your comments, your thoughts in the comments section, of course. And if you enjoyed this, please like the video, please share it with a friend, and also subscribe if you want to stay up to date with what I share. Thank you.